the very first hand that I played, some shit went down already. Very first hand. So under the gun opens for 40. Guy in his direct left calls. Middle position calls, and I have ace queen in the big blind. I think you can put the squeeze play on, but with the original raise coming from under the gun, it kind of discourages me a little bit. I think you could pretty easily go either way. I'm happy to call with ace queen and keep a lot of the hands that I dominate in there, but ace queen blocks a lot of value hands, so I think a 3-bet squeeze is certainly reasonable, but I decide to just call. So we go 4 ways to a flop. Flop is ace queen 3 with 2 diamonds. I check, the initial raiser checks, next guy checks, and the player in middle position puts out a small bet. He bets $60. Being out of position and having a flush draw on board, I think a raise is in order here. If there was no flush draw on board, I might be a little bit more tempted to just call. He didn't buy in for the full amount. He bought in for somewhere around 900, something like that. It was a little confusing because he brought some chips from a 2-5 game, and some of the chips were being brought to him from a chip runner. So with the flush draw on board and his small sizing and us being out of position, I decided to put in the check raise and I make it $200. It folds back to him and he thinks for a while, and then he makes the call. So we go heads up to the turn. Turn is an offsuit 8. Pretty good card for us, total brick. This is the point where I got a little bit confused about how much he had. I thought that he had somewhere around $600. And with that sizing, with that stack sizing, it's not that much more than a pot size bet. So I move all in. I just decide to jam it. It turns out he actually has about 750 left, maybe between 700 and 750. So it ends up being a little bit more of an overbet than I expected. But I don't think it matters too much. I think it's okay because if I do have a flush draw, I might play it the same way if I do have a flush draw here, especially if it's a combo draw. So it's not a super massive overbet. It is an overbet, but not a huge overbet. But anyway, he goes into the tank, thinks and thinks, and then he makes the call. River is an offsuit deuce, and I show my hand, and he mucks. So very first hand, we end up stacking a player, and we get the maximum on the flop 2 pair. So off to a pretty quick start there in the 5-10 game. All right, so some interesting hands to discuss from the session. First one came when a reg opened from early position to 40. We look down at king queen of hearts on the button and make the call, and the big blind calls as well. So we go 3 ways to flop. Flop is king 9-5 rainbow. Big blind checks, and the initial raiser bets 40. Pretty small bet, but I think we only have one option here. Folding out of the question, raising seems bad, so I call, and the big blind folds. So we go heads up to a turn. Turn is a 6. This time the initial raiser bets 110. It's an interesting point in the hand because I suspect if he's betting this turn, he's probably going to bet the river. So he's definitely capable of running a 3-barrel, especially if you happen to pick up some equity and he still doesn't think he has the best hand. So if he happened to have a gut shot on the flop and he picked up a pair, I don't know necessarily that he would slow down because it's pretty tough for that type of a hand to be the best hand here on the turn still. So I think he could still be betting and setting up a 3-barrel. We still beat king jack and king 10, but I'm not sure if he would be betting those hands in this spot. I don't know if you go into check call mode or if he would continue betting. I suspect he might go into check call mode, but it's tough to say for sure. I know he's a good player. He's a good reg. He's a good winning reg. Not an easy player to play against. So I think he's fairly balanced in this spot. So he could have some straight draws on the flop. He could have some better kings. He could have some worse kings, but I'm not sure if he would bet the worst kings on the turn. But it feels slightly too weak to just throw away king queen here on the turn. So I make the call and we head to the river. River's another 9. I think that's a pretty good card because I suspect that he probably wouldn't bet a 9 on the flop. I think he might check call with a 9. It's tough to say for sure, as always, but it seems like the 9 doesn't really change too much as far as hurting us. I feel like it helps us, if anything, because it takes away the number of sets, combinations of sets that he could have on the flop. So it doesn't seem like a bad card. but this time he bets $330. So it's pretty much the same situation that I suspected was going to happen when I called the turn. I suspected he was going to bet pretty much any river card. I just expected him to always bet the river. I don't think King Queen is super high up on our range here on the river. We could easily have full houses, potentially a straight. It's the best king we could have because I would 3-bet ace king, so somewhere in the middle, I guess. Since it's in the middle, I don't think it's too bad to go either way, calling or folding. I just decided to stick to the plan since I knew he was going to bet any river, and he did. So I toss it in, I make the call, and he rolls over 7-8. So he turned the nuts, turned a straight. I suspect if he had a different gut shot type hand, that he would continue betting, because even if he turns a pair and if he doesn't think it's good, which is very reasonable to think, I suspect he could keep betting, and then he could turn that pair into a 3-barrel bluff. Now, whether that's actually the case, whether he would do that for sure, I don't know, but he's definitely capable of it. So I think my call is fine. So not great, not terrible. Next spot came up pretty shortly after that. We're playing four-handed. It's the middle of the night on a Wednesday night, so playing super short-handed here, four-handed, and the same player opens up for 30 from under the gun. Once again, look down at King Queen on the button, and I make the call. This time we go heads up. Flop is Ace King 9 rainbow. He puts out a C bet, very small C bet again. He bets 20. Second pair, best kicker. Pretty straightforward. Once again, I make the call. Turn is a good card. Turn is a king. Puts a backdoor flush draw up, but pretty good card, I would say, for us. This time he checks, and I make a fairly small bet again. I bet 40. Maybe I could bet bigger and try and charge the max that I can get from an ace. I don't think an ace would just automatically check fold here, so probably could have bet a little bigger, but I bet 40, and he makes the call. So we're off to the river. River is a blank. River's an offsuit 7. He checks again, and I try to get some more value. I bet 110. This is where it gets pretty interesting. Doesn't call, doesn't fold, puts in the check raise, makes it 400 to go. Pretty weird spot, and this time we have pretty close to the top of our range. The only better hands that we could have here would be pocket 9s. If we somehow had like King 9 suited, that would be a better hand. We would never have pocket 7s here. We would never have Ace King here. We would never have pocket aces or pocket kings here. So we have the third best hand that we could possibly have here. Feels like it's pretty close to the top of our range. The problem is we beat absolutely nothing for value unless he decides to take some sort of interesting line with King Jack, King 10. Seems highly unlikely. So we beat pretty much nothing for value, and he has to be turning some sort of a hand like Queen Jack, Queen 10 into a bluff, or a random ace into a bluff. Perhaps he could have picked up a flush draw on the turn, but I don't know, it's weird. I suspect that he would continue betting with those hands on the turn. Really weird spot. Doesn't feel great. So I go into the tank and I'm just trying to figure out whether I can fold this hand. I think it's fairly close, but him being a good player and being fairly balanced as far as I can tell, as far as I know, and us just having the pretty close to the top of our range, toss in the call, make the call once again, and once again we get shown the goods, pocket aces. So I don't know, I keep running into the top of people's ranges here, but I don't know. We block Ace King, we block King 9. I think he never has pocket 7s there, just like we never have pocket 7s there. Is he capable of just turning a random hand into a bluff here, just because his range is less capped than my range is? Sure, he's capable of it. Would he do it? Who knows? So I don't know. Not really loving how these hands are playing out. Keep running into the goods when I thought I had a decent hand, but not good enough. So that's kind of the story of my night for the most part. The story of my morning, I should say. Just getting whacked left and right. So gonna book a loss this session. That's the way it goes sometimes. Believe it or not, that vlog run good doesn't happen every time. So We book a loss of a little bit over $1,200.